Alright, today we're going to talk about paper, what paper you should use for your comic book creation. The key here before I go into all this is the main thing is you're going to want to experiment for what feels best for you and what works best for you, what you're using. If you're coloring with alcohol-based markers or things like that, this test that I did doesn't reflect any of that, so my paper rankings that I'm going to go through don't really have any effect on that. So like I said, for what you're using, it may differ from what I use and what I find works best for me. Again, I touched on another video, size doesn't really matter. It all depends on what your goals are. I tend to work at 11 by 17. It's the standard for Western comics. Also, I do a lot of inking projects, so a lot of the stuff that I get for pencils is 11 by 17. So you'll see most of my stuff is 11 by 17. I also do some stuff in B4, and it's handy if you're an inker to have some quality B4 on hand. That way, if you're working in like a Japanese print standard size, you have something to ink on for that. Or if that's what you want to work with, hey, whatever. So I'm going to go through some different papers that I have here in my stack for different uses. I have smooth surface or plate, Strathmore 500 series. Just move this off to the side. This is 400 series 4-ply. It's substantially thicker than the other stuff. I don't know if you can see, but it's twice as thick as most of the, or actually all the Bristol that I have here is twice as thick. So this is 400 series. This was bigger sheets that I cut down to 11 by 17. This is Eon Board, also 11 by 17. Deleter V4 135 weight paper. IC 135 comic paper. Also, it's pre-rolled. This is the Canson Fanboy comic paper. There's two lines of this. One has a red cover, which is foundation, and then they have the artist series, which is the purple cover. All of their papers use that color coding. So if you see their 2-ply Bristol, which is the exact same stuff as this from what I can tell, same weight, thickness, everything. It will also have, the artist series will also have the purple. This is the foundation series, 2-ply Bristol, and 14 by 17. I cut this down to 11 by 17 when I work on it, and Strathmore 300 series, 11 by 17. So all the paper that I have here, I did some little tests on. These are the papers that I use. Let's move these out of the way real quick. All right. So the main thing is, sorry about that, things are falling. The main thing is to find a paper that works well for you, and pretty much all the papers I just showed can result in decent results. They really do. I'm gonna bring out, these are the individual sheets. This is I believe this is IC here, and yeah, the IC and Deleter comic paper are both B4 size. You can see that I cut out some corners. This was just for test. I'll use these for like little doodles or something, or smaller drawing projects, so I don't waste the paper. This is 500 series stuff here. Eon Board. This is the Kansan stuff. This, again, I took a chunk out of there. This is foundation, I believe. This is 300 series. This is 500 here. It was something that I'm working on. And this is foundation from where I actually took the sample from there. As you can see, I mean, this is me working on 500. Most of this was done in brush. Some nib work was done. First panel was done with nibs. This was brush. This is still in use. This with blue line pencils. Nothing on that one. Now this is 500. This is foundation series. This is like the Strathmore 300. As you can see, that there's some processed white that's thrown on there to cover up some smudges. This was a really sloppy ink job that I did, but it still has the pencil lay down, and this is going to be for an upcoming video on doing speed lines, or force lines as they're called here. This is the Canson Artist Series stuff. This was all brush except for quill work done in the face here, and the background was done with a 102 crow quill. Again, great results. This one was done all with G pen and Maru pen, and some stuff like the speed lining done in here was done with a 102. And same with this panel, was done with a 102 as well. As you can see, I mean, this Eon board is really, really bright. If you're a person who likes really high contrast between their inks and their paper, this stuff is, I mean, this is the brightest paper I've run across, like, ever. It's also one of the smoothest papers out there as well. But I have my little paper samples here where I did my tests. 500 series Eon board, IC paper, you know, 400 4-ply deleter, Kansan comic, Kansan foundation, and then the 300 series. And basically the way it works is I rank the paper on like 4 different categories pretty much. Smoothest, brightest, toughest, and like the overall feeling. And I also checked ink compatibility for the inks that I have on hand, which you can see here. My most commonly used inks. I have some other inks on hand, but the Eon Vortex, Pilot, Drafting, Deleter number 3, Kaime, Speedball Super Black, and Black Magic from Higgins. I'm just going to run through this. I don't want the video to run too long, but the smoothest papers were the IC comic paper, followed by Deleter and Eon board. The Deleter and Eon board and IC were really, really close in smoothness. They're all exceptionally smooth papers, but the IC was noticeably smoother. The Deleter and Eon isn't that noticeable in difference. The brightest, like I said, by far was the Eon, followed by, believe it or not, the Strathmore 300. They really bleached it quite a bit. Then the Kansan foundation series, the artist series, the Deleter paper, and the 500 series Strathmore are all, they're too close to tell. And then IC was by far the darkest paper out of all of them. I don't know if you can tell, hopefully it shows up on video, but I mean, they're by far. That's the Deleter, 400, Eon, 300 series. You can tell the IC paper is by far the darkest out of all of them. Honestly, brightness for me isn't at all an important factor at all, because when you scan it in, it's either white or black, so how bright the paper is doesn't really make much of a difference. Now, if you're doing original art for sale, I would probably use either the 500 Eon or 400. They're reasonably bright and they hold up well over time. The Eon is probably the best looking, but it is pre-lined, so for original artwork, unless you want it to have that comic book feel, like if it's a cover that you did, that you plan on selling, you can use that. But otherwise, I use the non-rolled stuff for original artwork that's going to be sold. The toughest surface was by far the 500 series. It's pure cotton, handled really, really well. The way I tested it is I went over the same spot with some ink with a 102 crow quill, and it took roughly 10 strokes to tear up the surface. Your mileage may vary depending on how hard you press and everything. Followed by the IC was actually pretty tough. I think it tore somewhere around 8 or 9 strokes. The thing to know about the Japanese papers, like the Deleter and the IC, is they're not really Bristol paper, they're thinner. Or if they're a Bristol, they're like a 1-ply. But it's like I don't know, it's like 2/3 the thickness. It is thinner. And something you need to know about it is if you're heavy on the erasers, you can warp the paper when working with it. You can crinkle it much easier than the Bristol. Anyway, toughest goes 500 series, IC, Canson, Eon, and the 400 series, Eon 400 series are about the same. It's somewhere between 4 and 5 strokes. The deleter paper, I made references on here, was right around 4 strokes. However, it's kind of iffy because it actually tore a little bit in the little swoop that I did here, but you can't notice it in there, so in the line itself. Then the Foundation series, and which was right around 4 as well, and then the 300 2-ply was 3. And it actually tore when I was doing some testing for bleeding up the corner. It actually tore on one of the little featherings that I did. Overall feel, this is really subjective. It's how the pen moves on the paper and how tough the surface is and how it holds the ink and everything. For me, my favorite is the 500 series. It's an expensive paper, but you know, you get what you pay for, I guess. Eon was also right up there for me as far as a favorite paper to work with. It's really smooth, bright, holds ink well. Icy is next on the list for me. It's a great paper to work with, especially with nibs. Nibs work really well on it. 400 series is a step down from the 500. It's pure wood pulp versus cotton. It's not as durable, but it holds ink really well, and it's a smooth paper. Then the Artist series and Deleter. The Artist series is actually the roughest of them. It's the toothiest out of all of them, and you can actually see where it was pressed when you look up close at it. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. Probably not with the lighting in here, but it's really rough. But ink works well on it. I didn't have any problems doing detail work with it. And the Deleter paper I've used a lot in the past. It's pretty good. I mean, I don't knock it. Then the Foundation series, I prefer to work on the Kansan Foundation over the Strathmore 300. Even the Foundation series, even though it's like darker, it is a little bit more durable, and it seems to hold the ink a little bit better. And overall, also, when you're dealing with like pigment liners and things, one of the things to look at how like the ink holds or how it bleeds with the pigment liners. I know the 500 did really well. The Eon Board did well as well. Same with the 400. I mean, overall they all worked pretty well. I'm trying to remember between the Deleter and the Icy. I think the Deleter actually holds the ink from the pigment liners better than the Icy does. So I would say if you're doing manga based stuff and want to use manga paper, if you're using nibs, go with Icy. It's a smoother surface, it's more durable, and if you're doing screen tone, Icy is by far better. The Deleter seems to hold the line with pigment liners better. The 300 series was absolutely the worst with the bleeding from the pigment liners, and the Canson Foundation series was just a step above it. Overall, when you go to reduce it, it's not that big of a difference, but I mean, I guess it all adds up, especially when doing background work. The 4 that really stood out are the 500, the Eon Board, the 400, and the Icy. And then I did some ink compatibility just to see overall if you like specific inks, what papers you use. Now the 500 worked with everything. The Foundation and Artist series Canson, basically the Canson bristles, worked with everything. The 300 series, if it's new stock, works with everything. The 400, surprisingly, was the only one that did not work well with the Black Magic. It did bleed a little bit, but not horribly with the Higgins Black Magic. The Icy, same story, worked well with everything but the Higgins Black Magic. It bled pretty badly. The Deleter, same story. It bled even worse than the Black Magic. Or with the Black Magic, bled even worse. And the least compatible paper is the Eon Board, believe it or not. While it works great with most of my inks, the Deleter number 3 ink and especially the Black Magic bleed really, especially the black magic, bleeds really, really bad. This is something I knew about, however, the owner of Eon, and they stated on their website as well, that do not use black magic with their board, and I verified that here. Basically, just make sure whatever paper you're working with is compatible with your inks and everything, and now you have a general idea. At the end of the video, so like coming up here in like a minute, I will have, actually I take that back, there will be a link at the bottom of the page that has the high resolution scans of these cards, so you can see the difference in the line qualities and everything. I did drink like a huge thing of cherry Coke, so my hands were shaky during the test, so don't see my scribbliness as a sign of the smoothness of the paper. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I guess just to finish it off, like I said, any of the papers mentioned that I have demoed up here will give you really decent results, much better than trying to draw on, in my opinion, better than most papers, especially like sketchbook paper or copy paper. Even if you're using nibs, some drawing paper is not too good, or marker paper. Marker paper can work really, really well with pigment liners, if I remember correctly. Japanese Kent paper, which is kind of like a single ply Bristol, works well with markers and nibs and stuff, which I don't have a sample of that to show here, but like I said, it's all about what you want to do with it, the tools that you use and what you like. For me, I like the Eon Board, the 500 and the 400 and the Icy. Between the smoothness, the durability, and how it holds the ink, for me, it gives you the best feeling and overall look to the completed project. They are more expensive papers though, especially that the 400. You can buy it in 2-ply. I go to the art store and get 4-ply and cut it down, but it's not cost effective. It comes out to be like $2.50 a page because of the fact it is 4-ply. You can order 3-ply or even 5-ply online, but you know, I just wanted to have some 4-ply on hand, or some 400 series on hand for this test. It turns out I didn't have any, so I'm sure I'll use it for something. But anyway, as always, if you have any questions in regards to this video, or you know, want to see something in an upcoming video or in a new video, or just anything, just leave it in the comment below, and I'll either make a video for it or respond to you directly in the comments. All right, everybody have a good night.